Last week I put up a quick video that showed how to do micro adjustments to autofocus with the Canon 70D. Now this isn't directly related to the focusing issue with the 70D, the focusing issue being very inconsistent results when using the center focus point at wide apertures and longer distances. To be able to clearly determine how bad the issue is, when it affects the camera the most, I want to make sure that all of my lenses are dialed in to be as precise as possible with this 70D that I'm using. And micro adjustments to autofocus is one of the ways to do that. Now, this is something that is offered on your kind of prosumer and professional level cameras to allow for variance in manufacturing of lenses. This does not point out that the camera is broken, but simply says some lenses that roll off the production line made by everybody, including Canon, Nikon, may be slightly manufactured in just a slightly different way with slight differences. We're talking about tenths of millimeters here, and allowing you to do the micro adjustments will make your focus more precise. Now, the method I used was a little bit of an older fashioned method. I knew there were some newer methods out there, but I hadn't really explored them in detail. But I put that video up, and as I often do, I get great comments, and there were a couple of them that pointed to newer methods that I thought, well, I should try these. One was Ruby pointed to this Arash Hazigi's method, and so I'm going to go over that method right now. So you need, of course, your camera and your lens. And then you need that EOS utility software that came with your camera. You want to install that, and you want to connect your camera to your computer so that you can do the live view on your computer. And so right now I have running over here the EOS utility software, and I can go into my live view settings right here. Right now I'm using the 35 f1.4 from Sigma, but I've also done this test with the 85 and the 50. And the test is pretty straightforward. If you watched my video last week, you need some kind of clear target that will really let you see in detail when you have best focus. I'm using the Spider lens cowl thing, or lens cowl Spider it's called. It's actually a little bit more expensive than I thought it was. Christina had bought it. It's about 60 bucks. But you could print out, there are printouts you can use, or any kind of fine text will work as well. But what you need to do is make sure that that is level and on the exact same focal plane as your camera, and your camera needs to be level and mounted on a steady tripod. You run this live view software. You want to be in quick mode, which is using the focus that micro adjustments affect. The micro adjustments to autofocus does not affect your live view focus. Any of those different methods that you have the face detection, flexi-zone, multi-single. We have to do quick mode, and that uses those boxes. Now, you can see that it's centered on this target, and I want to zoom in even more and go right here, magnify, and I want to zoom in even more and go to the 200% view. First thing I'm going to do is defocus the lens. You can see that it wiggles a lot when I touch the camera. And I'm going to then ask it to focus by pressing the on button right here. And the screen blacks out for a second because this method of focusing flips the mirror down so it can get focus, and then flips it back up to turn live view back on. Now you can see that that doesn't look as sharp as it could be. Our goal now is to use these left and right buttons to change the focus one adjustment at a time. Each time we click on these are equivalent to the value of the micro adjustment page in the camera menu, and we'll look at that in a minute. So I'm just going to start going to the right arbitrarily. I don't know if left or right is going to make this more in focus at first, and I'm going to count each time I press the button, watching for sharper focus. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, definitely getting out of focus. The changes are pretty subtle. Let's go back. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 2, 3. To me, it looks somewhere around 2 or 3. So I'm going to write that value down. This is with the Sigma 35, 2 or 3. If you were doing this test, I don't want to make this video too long. I'm good at that. I would repeat this test 2, 3, 4 times. That is defocus click the autofocus button so it comes back, and then start pressing this button. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and paying attention. Let's switch lenses now and try this with the 85. So I now have the 85mm f1.8 from Canon on here. Everything is the same. I'm in this view. I want to go to 200% view to really zoom in. And I'm going to do quick mode on. And so then you can see that we have focus and we are much closer and we're seeing those little wiggles. And I'm going to repeat the same process. I'm just going to start clicking to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So I'm starting to see purple fuzz. It looked just sharper a second ago. I'm going to go back. 16, 15, 14, 13, 14. So I'm going to write down 14. That's where it looks like it's sharpest with the 85. 14. It's a fairly big difference. Our value that we have available to us is -20 to +20. And so this was, for both of these so far, this was positive that we need to change. So again, I would repeat this test several times and see if you get 14 or some number thereabout. If you get a slightly different number each time, you should average it. If you get a very different number each time, then you have a bigger issue. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So repeat this test with any lenses that you use on your camera. So then what you want to do is you want to go into the micro adjustment menu of the camera and make the changes based on the numbers you found. Let's look at that now. All right, so now we're assuming that you have completed multiple tests with each lens and you're ready to do your micro adjustments in the camera. You want to dive into the menu, and it is the last menu item before you get to the custom menu. So right here, second custom function, autofocus. This is available on the 70D. It was not available on the 60D, earlier 50D. Of course, 5D Mark II, 5D Mark III, and on the Nikon side as well. It's not something that's available in the Canon T5i or lower cameras. They just don't give you this option. So we now have the ability to disable, which is, adjust all by the same amount. So if for some freaky instance you found that all of your lenses needed just +5 or -5 or +7, you could do that. But what's more likely is, and what we found, is that each lens is going to need to be adjusted a slightly different amount. So I'm going to come down here to adjust by lens, and notice as soon as I do that, it knows what lens I currently have on. So I'm going to start with the 85 register, and that brings up the screen. Now, the number we came up with from clicking left or right, right being positive, left being negative, is the number we want to input here. So my results for the 85 found about +14. So we just want to go to the right till we hit +14. Thereabout. And it's a fairly large amount. I'm going to click OK. It will remember anytime I put this lens on that it needs to adjust by +14. I'm going to say set OK, and I can get back out of here. Menu. Now what you should do is fire up that software and shoot a couple of more images and see if, when it focuses, is it as sharp as it can be. If you find that you're going below or above that amount using those little left and right, then you should recalibrate what your number is and put it back in here. Let's just throw the other lens on real quick. The Sigma 35, we found that number to be about 2 or 3. So autofocus, adjust by lens, register. You can see that it knows it's a 35, and I'm just going to go to the right, 2 or 3. And that is how you're going to micro adjust the autofocus of your Canon 70D with various lenses using the live view / tethered view on the computer. Now that I've micro adjusted all of my lenses, I'm going to go outside and test at longer distances the 70D center focus point issue. And this is why I think Canon is sending many of these back and saying that they're fine, because at these shorter distances I'm finding the results to be fairly consistent, and with just some micro adjustments to autofocus within the realm of possible, I'm finding fairly consistent results. But when you shoot at those longer distances and very wide focal lengths, I'm seeing much larger variance. And that is the issue that doesn't seem to be correctable. So I want to talk a little bit about what I did after I dialed in all of these lenses, because I have sent my 70D off to Canon. They returned it. My just quick initial tests showed that I really didn't think it was fixed. Why is Canon saying it's fixed? I've heard from other people that they've gotten it back and either said it's fixed or said there was no issue at all. So as I mentioned in the video, I think that they're doing their testing within those normal parameters, or what they consider to be normal parameters, for the micro focus adjustments, which is at shorter distances. And at these short distances, once I had adjusted every lens, my results were quite consistently decent. There still is some difference. I'll talk about why I think that's okay in a second. Outside, at those well, I went outside because I needed a little bit more room. At those longer distances, above 15 feet, 20, 30, there is still a good bit of inconsistency. It seems to be a little bit less, and I don't really have a good reason for that, because the micro adjustments shouldn't necessarily make something more consistent or less consistent. They either consistently fix it or they consistently don't. But this is one of those issues where I think there are some other factors going on that I don't quite understand. But outside, there was still some inconsistency. Now, what about other cameras? That was my thought. You know, I've seen clips and images from the 60D center focus point that does not show this issue at all. But when you take a lot of pictures, what do you end up with? So I tested the T5i, I tested the 5D Mark III. Those are the cameras I had easily available to me. I'd like to test the D5200, which I also have. I haven't had time to do that yet. But what I found was the T5i, at those longer distances, center focus point does give some inconsistencies as well. And so what am I saying when I'm saying inconsistency? Basically, the autofocus using that center focus point is pretty darn soft. Especially compared to live view, or compared to a shot previous or a shot after. And I was finding that the 70D still was the most inconsistent of all of them. The number of shots that were out of focus using the center focus point was higher, but not by a huge factor or huge margin over the T5i. 5D Mark III was pretty darn sharp most of the time, but there was an occasional shot. And again, I've ruled out shutter speed and all of the other things that I really have control over, other than just kind of randomness happening in the camera. Now, it's not really something we want to hear about, randomness happening in the camera, but that seems to be the issue with the center point. There's something that isn't calibrated right, or something that causes some number of shots to be greatly out of focus. Switching to points other than the center focus point, it's better, but it's not hugely better. So you know, we run up against this testing scenario that is not one that most people are going to run into out in the real world. That's why we're seeing this great, you know, almost 5-star rating on Amazon here in the US. That's why most of the reviews of this camera are glowing, because it's kind of a unique situation, but it is certainly some that some photographers could run into. There are situations where you want to shoot at the widest aperture you have available to you, and those distances where you might be focusing are a little bit further out. Oh, another thing I want to do is just print 2 different images, because you really don't see any difference until you zoom in. And I think on printed images, it's probably going to be pretty hard to tell at 4x6, 5x7, 8x10s. Does that mean it's acceptable? No. But again, this is why so few people are talking about this issue. What am I going to do? So, you know, I've confirmed that the T5i does sometimes focus inconsistently, just not as much. The 5D Mark III does also focus inconsistently at times, even less though than the T5i, meaning it's sharper most of the time. There's just an occasional picture. And the 70D, enough that I'm going to send it in one more time and tell Canon explicitly, talk about these distances where you see this issue and say, look, after micro adjustments, after you all said it was fixed, at these longer distances, you get some shots often enough that I find it unacceptable, and what do you say? So we'll see. And some people have said, don't they know you're a bigwig? I'm not a bigwig. So, you know, I don't have any pull or any say, and I think they're going to treat me like they treat anybody else. I might point them to this video, I might point them to the other, which has gained a good number of views, but I think they don't really care, and I'm not sure that they even looked the first time, because they certainly didn't make any mention of that. So, For now, I'm done talking about the 70D focus issue. I'll send it off in the next week or so. I will keep you all updated on that. I love the size of this camera. I love the performance. I love the video focusing. I still often take it with me. I just don't use it in any situation where I need to use that center focus point. I have the luxury of, taking along another camera when I know I'm going to be shooting in lower light with faster lenses at those longer distances. If this was my only camera, I'd be bummed. I wasn't only going to shoot video with it, because video, folks, doesn't matter. This doesn't affect you at all. But the rest of us who want to use that center focus point with fast lenses, you're affected, probably. I think it affects more cameras than we think. I have heard from some people that definitely don't have it, and they detailed their testing methods, and I believe them. I've definitely heard from plenty of people that do see this issue. Please don't write and say, yes, mine's bad too, unless you followed those testing steps that I've written about, and I'll put a link to that back down below. If you get a blurry picture every once in a while from your 70D with your kit lens, that is not the issue. There's lots of other ways to get blurry pictures, so keep that in mind. But I'm going to wrap this up because it's already longer than I wanted to talk about this. 70D, going back to Canon one more time. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe.